Hello, and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoons, the weekly podcast that revisits, reviews, and ridicules some of the world's weirdest animated series. Coming to you from Third Earth, I'll be your host, Dave Trumbore. Joining me, as always, he's a blasted mutant. It's Sean Paul Ellis. How you doing, Sean?
David, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Buddy, I'm doing pretty great tonight. Also joining us, as per usual, he's one of the ancient spirits of evil. It's Matt Barron. How are you tonight, sir?
Doing really good. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. And listeners, this is our 25th episode of the podcast, which I am very proud of. I wasn't quite sure we were going to make it this far. As a special,
I am shocked.
as a special guest tonight, we have the one, the only, Steve Frosty Weintraub of Collider.com. Say hello to the good folks, Steve.
How are you guys doing today?
Doing pretty well, doing pretty well. I'm going to turn it over to Steve for a little bit. We're going to change it over from how we normally do this. We're not going to get into the show, which is, of course, ThunderCats tonight. We're not going to get there quite yet. We want to talk to Steve a little bit about kind of the business behind the scenes of Hollywood, of TV production, of nostalgia, of current cartoons and past cartoons and all kinds of stuff. But before we get into any of that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve. He's going to introduce himself. For you folks who aren't quite familiar with Collider.com yet, and you should be, you're going to learn a little bit about the site and what they do. So take it away, Steve.
As Dave said, my name's Steve Weintraub. I'm the editor-in-chief of Collider.com. We have at least 5 readers every day on the site, sometimes a little bit more. And we cover movie news, TV news, pop culture, but primarily movies and TV. And we, land exclusive interviews with some pretty good people in Hollywood. And we do TV recaps. We cover news as it's breaking, trailers, posters. If you're into like movies and TV, you will probably enjoy the site. I'm pretty confident.
Yeah, I think so. Steve's being incredibly humble right now. We've got readers and listeners, because we also have a podcast on Collider.com that's run by Matt and Adam, the other editors, the senior editors on the site. We've got readers kind of all over the world for all walks of life that come to the site for all kinds of different things. Today we're going to focus that discussion more or less to the state of cartoons, not only today, but also kind of the cartoons from our past and the bit of nostalgia that surrounds them, mostly because the current spate in Hollywood production is to go back to those nostalgic properties, see how they can kind of retrofit them, and then make money off of the fans like you and I, who will definitely go pay to see whatever they churn out. Now, we've talked about this in the last few weeks. Steve, I think you're probably familiar with this. It was just a couple of weeks ago that the last block of Saturday morning cartoons on network television ended. There's no more Saturday morning cartoons on network TV. It's all on cable channels or satellite channels or on-demand internet stuff. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, how it affected you, if you have any kind of like fond memories of turning on that TV Saturday morning early, sitting down with a bowl of cereal, and just what were some of your favorites to watch growing up?
To be honest, I started thinking about that earlier today, about what did I remember growing up, and I think specifically, I don't have one cartoon that I remember vividly as the show. Obviously I could mention, Smurfs or Robotech or Star Blazers, or, I grew up in New England and they used to air on channel 56 and 25, which are like these UHF channels.
Right.
Like these Japanese anime shows and just, tons of stuff. But mostly what I remember is waking up way before my parents at like 6 a.m. and knowing that I should not wake them up,
Right.
and knowing that I could turn the TV on and cartoons would be on from the moment I woke up on Saturday mornings till, forever. It just felt that way. And I remember waking up really early and getting some food and sitting my ass down and watching cartoons, for hours. That's my most vivid memory, not specifically one show, as much as just the whole morning.
Yeah, it was almost like a ritual kind of event. Like every Saturday morning, there would be cartoons, and they would change occasionally, but there would always be just that time for you as a little kid to just like go crazy with imagination and just kind of see what was on TV, see what was coming to you. And we've talked about this a little bit before, but we never really took the time to kind of get into like our memories of it, our like favorite, not even necessarily favorite shows, but just favorite memories of that. For me personally, I don't know if I mentioned this on the show or not, but I came from kind of a weird, kind of a split up family. So I would go with my dad on certain weekends and I would stay home with my mom on other weekends. So some Saturday mornings for me were me just literally waking up and then watching cartoons until my dad came to pick me up. And it was just, I don't know, that's just a cool memory for me. And now it's not so much about the cartoons because they're accessible everywhere, but it's more that, like, I don't know, those kids today can access a cartoon 24/7 as long as their parents pay for the channel. They can find it anywhere, anytime, whenever they want to. They can do it when they're in the car with their, their iPad or iPhone. They can do it anytime, and it just doesn't quite have that same, I don't know, that same cool feel. It's almost like a Christmas morning feel every Saturday morning. Sean and Matt, did you guys have any stories like that just this show kind of reminds you of?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really was, very much about the ritual because,
Yeah.
The shows that I watched, I mean, they changed over the years. I mean, they were on the air, they were off the air. But, really the thing that never changed throughout the entire time I was watching that, Saturday morning cartoons really was like waking up super early,
Right.
The bowl of cereal sitting like way too close to the TV, developing neck problems later in life. But, I mean, that's really what it was. I mean, it wasn't about so much what was on TV. I mean, because you'd miss, Saturday mornings if you get like, begrudgingly dragged away from the TV. So, you miss the story arc, you miss individual episodes, but it really didn't matter. I mean, it was entertainment, it was, imagination, it was just, the whole every small detail, leading into what you were watching. I mean, that was what I remember the most.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Sean? I'm sure you've got some stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, a big part of it, in addition to the ritual, was sort of finding that like sweet spot of, okay, if I watch these two cartoons on Fox, I can change over to another channel
Yes.
at like 10:30 and watch another two episodes of something else. So it was always finding that sweet spot of like different things to volley back and forth between.
Right.
Yeah,
The commercial breaks
was
that you had to
interested in.
like time. You had to time
Right.
commercial breaks to be like, oh, I don't want to miss X-Men, but Sonic's on at the same time or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it was I think it was finding those like 6 to maybe 8 cartoons during that morning, I want to say like 4 to 5 hour block that
Right.
I used to watch cartoons that I could volley back and forth between. And then I know that we've always talked about like the breakfast cereals, like
Yeah.
getting something like kind of prepared. But I mean, there was always that like hard cutoff at noon where it would switch. I think like in the 90s it would switch to like to Hercules with Kevin Sorbo and
Oh
then
my
Xena
God,
or
yeah.
the Princess after it.
Yeah.
And like that would be the time that I would come downstairs and I would continue to watch those, but then I would continue making food like well into that 2-hour period of continuing to watch even those live action things. So just very ritualistic in terms of what I did. And I did that for, I did that for probably
34
like,
years.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're still doing it today.
34 Yeah, I've been doing that for 34 years. So.
Yeah, we still make food and watch cartoons. That's exactly what we're doing.
I did that this morning with
Yeah,
ThunderCats.
there you
I
go.
made breakfast and I watched a bunch of episodes, so it was great.
Now that's actually interesting because one of the big reasons I wanted to have Steve come and talk to us today is because he's definitely got kind of an inside track and he's seen more of the kind of the behind the scenes of production of some of these cartoons that we knew and loved as kids, and then they've just come back in a huge way, some more than others and some definitely better than others. So I kind of want to talk to him and see if he can kind of give us like maybe a time capsule of when he first got into the business of Collider, when he first started to see that like, oh man, these reboots, these reimaginings, this is really going to be kind of the wave of the future for these movie studios.
Now,
Steve,
when
I
you
don't know,
say reboot, do you mean the reboot of reboot?
the one that hasn't happened yet, reboot of reboot?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean I'm
Reboot,
focusing
yeah.
more on like obviously the multi-billion-dollar Transformers franchise, the slightly less successful G.I. Joe franchise, the more recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, just things like that. Steve, when you got into the business, where was that at when you kind of got into Collider, and was Collider even trying to corner that market quite yet, or I've always been curious about how we kind of fit in during that time.
Well, we launched in July of 2005,
Mhm.
so we've been doing this for a little over 9 years, and I don't remember back then the nostalgia of rebooting all these franchises the way it is nowadays. I think that something to look at is a lot of the executives that are now in control at studios are people that grew up with these cartoons. And with this these properties. And so, in the back of their brain, they're thinking, I grew up loving that. I want to share that. I want to redo it. And it has, the biggest issue is launching a new property is very, very challenging,
Right.
because there's no name recognition. No one knows anything about it. So you have to educate people to the characters, the universe, to everything. And that costs money.
Mhm.
And that is why movie studios and TV networks and all these IP creators, wherever you're going to put the content, they're less likely to try to do new things as much as reboot older things, just because it's a little bit easier. Everyone, with the ThunderCats, people grew up with that. With the fact that this is not a cartoon, but they're redoing Bewitched. They're redoing everything
Right.
nowadays. But the thing that you got to remember is, and I always say this because people just don't seem to realize, 95% of all ideas that you hear about in Variety, on Collider, on all these things, or wherever you read your content information, it never will happen.
Right.
These are ideas that are being developed by the studios. That's why when you hear about a filmmaker, whoever it may be, even Spielberg, he'll be attached to 7 or 8 different things, because you never know what's actually going to go. So studios will be trying to reboot things and relaunch brands you've heard of, but it never goes anywhere. I look at, like, example, Akira at Warner Brothers. They've been trying to get the feature film on that made for years and years. It's never gone anywhere. They've talked about what?
I was going to say, I remember they wanted to do a live action Neon Genesis Evangelion, and they had attached Peter Jackson for a while to be able to do some of the pre-production, just in terms of like the artwork and design for it, and that went as far as just maybe like a couple design sketches that were released online, and then it ended.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I try to always remind people is, until it's actually on TV, until they're filming, everything you're hearing about is just an idea. And that's why I get, it's so funny to me when people get so frustrated or angry that they're doing something, because 90% of the time it's not going to happen anyway. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's like they've got to secure the rights. They've got to, they got to get a ton of different just all different kinds of people and schedules and everything lined up. And that's just like on a good day for any movie anywhere or any production, there's just a ton of contractual things that they have to line up before anything even gets moving anywhere. And then, fads change. Some things are hot, some things don't quite work out so well. I mean, you mentioned ThunderCats earlier. They did try to reboot that series in 2011, I think was when the new series came on. I think it only lasted one season, and that was it. But at the same time, you can take other nostalgic properties, again, like I mentioned with Transformers. Now, love or hate the movies, they're hugely successful, and the fact that they're hugely successful overseas means they're probably not going anywhere anytime soon, because they're making money, they're making way more than they put into it, and they've already got the franchise built up and around it, so that's not going away anytime soon. The interesting thing is what's coming next. Yeah.
There's something important to remember, though, and that is the Transformers movies, the G.I. Joe, all this stuff, it is not aimed at anything other than selling toys.
Right.
That's it. And I know people just forget about that, but toy sales, merchandising is the primary driver of all of this stuff. Because if you can't sell toys just, they make so much money on that.
Yeah.
That's what Hasbro's all about. And, that's the primary thing.
Yeah.
It's always important to remember.
No, and it's funny, too, because... Go ahead, Sean.
I was going to say, Steve, it's really not just like the ticket sales that they have for the movies, the revenue and everything that they have for that, like, giant first weekend for a lot of these, Transformer movies. It's really just the toys.
Well, no, you see, that's an asterisk. Hasbro cares about the toys. Paramount cares about the Transformers box office.
Right.
But we look at for example, the last Transformers made $1 billion worldwide. Now that movie cost a ton of money to make, market, everything. But everyone on that movie made money. Paramount made money, Hasbro made money, it sold, I'm sure, a ton of toys, and it keeps the Transformers franchise going. and they create new toy lines, and it's just about keeping them in the limelight.
Look, and nothing's new with that either. I mean, pretty much every cartoon that we've talked about here on this show, so it's 24 odd cartoons, and that's just a drop in the bucket. Most of them either came like prepackaged with their own commercials for their own toys, like Dino Riders, or they came to promote toy lines that already existed from Mattel or from Hasbro or from some of these other kind of knockoff toy companies. I mean, we talked about Popples, we talked about the Exo Squad toys, definitely the Dino Rider toys. So that's nothing new. I think what's interesting is that Transformers at one point in time was an original creation. G.I. Joe at one point in time, now this is going way back, was an original creation that the 80s kind of did a retcon of. They did a completely overhauled that and changed it into something new. But in the 80s and 90s, it felt like there were a lot more original properties. Now, what the big difference is, it's not the mechanism behind how they're promoting them or what they're looking for as far as ticket sales and toy sales. It's the fact that they're mining old properties again, and like Steve mentioned, it's too risky financially and otherwise to kind of make something new. It feels like, I don't know what the hard numbers are, but it feels like for every 10 properties that maybe get a green light, one of them is going to be a runaway hit, and it's probably much worse odds than that, to be honest with you. But so yeah, I can understand why they put their bank on something that already has a built-in following. I guess what I kind of want to ask you guys next is, since we're in this age of rebooting and reimagining, do you feel like there's anything out there that for some reason people haven't rebooted yet or haven't seen the potential in yet? Is there anything kind of on your short list that you would love to see made into a live action feature or come back as a series, whether animated or not?
Well, I know Steve said it. I mean, I loved Robotech as a kid, so I would love to see that come back. And I know they actually cut a cel-shaded game, I think in the early 2000s, maybe I don't know, 2004 or something like that, give or take a couple years. But I mean, it had a great story, the whole Macross storyline I absolutely loved, and I would love to see that come back. But I mean, if it does not come back in a great way, I'm going to be real pissed. So.
Yeah, that's the caveat with any of these things. It's like we've got our nostalgia and we've got our memories and we love it. So you take a real risk of doing damage to that memory when you bring something back and it's not quite what you expected. Sean, is there anything that
Exactly.
I don't know, anything you would like to see rebooted? I feel pretty strongly that you're normally against those kinds of things. Is that correct?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, for the same reason that we just mentioned, was that if it's not something that I feel that it's done justice to, I kind of cringe about it. I don't typically get worried about, as Steve was saying, I don't feel until something is coming to fruition and coming out in theaters and there's an actual release date,
Right.
I don't get too worried about it. Or unless you attach Michael Bay to it, then I get really worried about it. But I guess the one thing I'd love to kind of have them work on is I had a ton of He-Man characters growing up, and I mean He-Man only ran for 2 seasons, and there were a lot of episodes, and I feel like that's sort of at that prime spot right now where they'd be able to bring it back for a newer generation, and do something different with it.
Well, and look too, lately the trend is not to just reboot one property one time and that's it. They put their $200 million into one movie and that's it. Now the trend is to build franchises, build worlds, build universes that you can have, 3 separate trilogies all coming together once every 6
Sure.
years.
And I feel like to go along with that idea, I feel like He-Man has that built in because of She-Ra.
Sure.
And I mean, I feel like we've seen this trend over the last couple years with sort of Marvel and DC trying
Right.
to diversify, in terms of gender and race, their lineup of characters that they present to their readers. And I would love to have more strong women characters, and I think She-Ra would be something that they could definitely work with.
I'll tell you
I
what,
mean,
we'll see how the Wonder Woman standalone.
I was just
does.
gonna say we're finally getting to see Wonder Woman on the big screen. So I mean that's great. I couldn't be happier about that.
Yeah. Steve, I want to throw it back to you real quick too. Are there any properties that you would love to see adapted, or are there any projects out there that are kind of in that gray area of coming true that you're pretty excited about? Anything that rings a bell?
Well, I mean, obviously, I've already mentioned
Right.
Robotech, but the problem with that is the '80s cartoon did the thing about Macross, which I loved, is that the whole show is basically one storyline, and I really have a feeling that if they redid it now, they would treat it like as the story of the week rather
Mm,
than having an arc that went on. And I think without having an arc, then you don't even bother. I think that kids are smarter than you give them credit for.
hmm
And if you're not aiming at like 6 and 9 year olds, you can, 11, 12 year olds, I believe you can aim an arc at them, even 10 year olds. But, it's going to sound funny. I was going to make a joke, like, let's reboot Mr. T. But being like,
Just Mr. T 2.0.
Get
like
Terry Crews on that.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
exactly. That's actually not bad.
Yeah.
But being serious, I actually could see a new cartoon of Dungeons and Dragons being
Ooh.
done really well, especially with the fact that a lot of that stuff that's in that, kids nowadays, a lot of them have seen Lord of the Rings,
Right.
and
Game of
you know,
Thrones, maybe not so much, but it's that kind of world. Yeah.
but more and more people now understand that world
Right.
than did back in the '80s. Now that with Game of Thrones, basically, parents know this world when back in the day they viewed it as what the hell is this?
Right.
So I really believe that a Dungeons and Dragons cartoon done well could have a group of both male and female protagonists, maybe mixed races with the white people, if you will, and showing them going together and trying to go on a mission, whatever it may be, but being able to show different lands and going on a cool adventure. But
Yeah.
I really think that could work and be rebooted and be well done.
Now that was I don't know if I ever really watched it, but that was a series back in what, the late 80s?
It was it was
It was early
Was
'80s.
it
It was
early 80s?
'83 to '85.
And how was it? Like I don't remember watching it. Was it decent? Was it terrible?
I watched it. I loved it.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of it.
Steve, you watched
And
that one?
and
Oh, I was going to say, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, it's about a bunch of kids that go through some portal, and
Right.
like the dungeon master won't let them return, and the
right.
kids now have powers. One's like an archer. They're all a little bit different, but it's '80s cartoons.
Yeah, that definitely sounds
They
like a
they
future installment on our show
they were
here.
in
We'll
like
have to
a they
revisit
were
it.
in like a carnival ride, and the carnival ride acted as a portal and sucked them in, and they all filled like the specific class roles.
Right.
There were like
Oh
6
God,
of
that
them.
is just classic '80s.
Yeah, that's
It was,
that.
but,
They
but
did
I
that
mean,
on
here's
what was the
to
one? King
Steve's.
Arthur and the Knights of the Round was similar, wasn't it? It was like a football team that fell through a portal somewhere and ended up being
Yeah, they got sucked in through the tilt-a-whirl.
Wow.
through the tilt-a-whirl. Yeah, so very similar. What were you gonna say,
I
Sean?
think that I think the thing that would be fascinating to Steve's point about Dungeons and Dragons is that, and I might be wrong with this, but I'm pretty sure that there was like the final episode had never been produced, and they really left it as like a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I don't remember that. Well, we'll definitely have to revisit
So
that on a future episode. Yeah, because that sounds like a fun
I
one.
remember kind of like in all of our research, like going back and looking at cartoons, I remember stumbling upon that again, and they were just like, it was like some listicle of like cartoons that like never really got like a proper finish.
Hmm.
And that was one of them. So I'd love to see Dungeons and Dragons come back.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. That's pretty
The
cool.
other thing to factor in, and I've screamed this again and again:
Yeah.
never underestimate the power of a good title.
Yeah, that's true, because some bad ones like, oh, I don't know, John Carter, can definitely kind of sink, it can definitely sink your project too. And yeah, that goes back to what you're saying about familiarity though too. I mean, if you say Transformers, you automatically know what that is. If you say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not Ninja Turtles, then you already know what that is. Yeah, and then some bad titles, that can definitely sink your ship before you get off to any kind of start whatsoever. What do you guys think is, because we're at about our halfway point now, what do you guys think is next? Right now, obviously, we're focusing a lot on superheroes and comic books and things like that, and it looks to be going for the next at least decade. Obviously, Star Wars is coming back in a big way over the next few years as well. But what do you think is the next kind of big trend as far as these adaptations and universe building and franchise building? I know a couple of you already mentioned different animes that haven't quite made their way over to America in as big a way as they are in obviously Japan and some other areas of the world. I'd point to them as maybe the next big thing if you can get a couple successful ones, but a lot of people definitely disagree with me on that point. So, where do you guys think they're going next? Can you prophesy, see where we're headed in the future?
Do you want me to answer this,
Sure,
or someone else
absolutely.
going
Yeah,
first?
yeah.
Oh, I was going to say that. Well, first of all, the comic book genre, the comic book movie, if you will, is not going anywhere anytime soon. If you look at the numbers for the movies that came out this year,
Right.
they're the biggest movies of the year. And even though they cost a ton of money to make, they have, great directors. The biggest actors are doing these movies, and it's, where the planet loves comic book movies because they're being done with respect,
Right.
and they're treating the characters well. And so, this is not going away anytime soon. However, Hollywood is definitely trying to open the door on video game adaptations
Right.
or adaptations. And I'm not sure it's going to work yet because, there's still work to be done, but they're definitely in development on a bunch of them.
Yeah, Ubisoft's got their hands in quite a few projects, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, Agent 47 comes out, Hitman Agent 47 comes
Right.
out early next year, or no, in summer. I know they're making a few others. I know Tom Hardy's talking about doing Splinter Cell.
Right.
I mean, they're
Wow.
definitely in the works. But again, it all comes down to whether or not the script is there, and how to properly adapt. They talked about doing Halo for a while, and that
Right.
fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
Now,
you know.
I mean, I think you brought up a really good point, Steve, with like how Hollywood has treated comic books now with respect, but we have like a really terrible history over the last like 3 decades of really doing terrible jobs with comic book adaptations. I mean, the first person who jumped into my mind was director, was it Uwe Boll?
Oh yeah, he's
And
oof.
just the terrible Alone in the Dark, House of the Dead, Postal, Blood Rain. I mean, all of these were successful, video game franchises at that point. Like, is there anything that, like, I mean, with the, understanding full well that we need to treat these things with respect, is there something that can be done in order to be able to kind of ease the transition from the small screen at home playing with a controller to something that we could watch like in a theater and celebrate in the same way that we're celebrating these comic book movies?
Well, you've already identified the main issue.
Right.
You mentioned the director. Those movies, a lot of them were financed. If I'm placing an asterisk here, but I'm pretty sure all these movies were financed through Germany, and he did this tax loophole, and the movies were made for like $1.50 and a roll of duct tape.
Right.
He actually finances his own films.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm saying he had like some sort of tax thing with Germany. It's a real gray thing, and ultimately, it comes down to those movies made by him were not done with the respect that the way they're currently being in development. And when I say with respect, I mean at least a $70 million budget, real actors, real directors that you've heard of, and a real script. Again, being treated with respect. Because if you look at the comic book movies, look at the old Fantastic Four that was made by Roger Corman. That was made for, again, like $1. And you can only go so far with it. But nowadays, they're made with a lot of love, and I believe that's what's coming for the video game movie.
Yeah, and it's like you said too, the people that are in places of influence and power and money and financial fortitude that they can actually make these decisions are people who grew up with them and understand them and are fans of them first and foremost. I mean, yes, you still do have a lot of people that are involved just from a business standpoint, but at least there's a little bit more heart in it. You've got people that understand what makes what makes Halo great, or what makes any of the Tom Clancy games great, or Assassin's Creed, any of these things. It's not just like a producer coming in, watching 5 minutes of it and just being like, yeah, I get the gist of it, we'll slap something together. You've actually got people who have made these into their passion projects, which is what I think was great for the comic book movies, and will I hopefully continue to be that way. And I think video games is definitely a big thing too.
Well, I think the other thing with video games is that, like, you realize that industry, correct me if I'm wrong, grosses more than the movie industry.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you break the statistics down, because when what was it? It wasn't Destiny. It was the big game that came out before that. It might have been the latest, like Grand Theft Auto. They were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the fourth Grand Theft Auto did $80 million in worldwide sales within the first 24 hours.
Yeah, so it was.
And I think Titanfall did a huge amount as well.
Yeah.
And now that you've
I think
got,
that might be the game you're referring to.
I mean, and like this crossover now from the separation between quality of video games, and I mean story, gameplay, visuals, effects, just the psychological things and the things that make you think in the video games are on par and sometimes better than what we're getting in a lot of movies these days. So the gap between those two is not that big. It's not nearly as big as it used to be. I think a lot of this comes into play, and Sean, you kind of alluded to this, where video games are obviously it's one person interacting with the game in a way that you don't do when you're watching a movie. You're not interacting
Right.
with the movie, you're viewing it. So it's like a first person versus a third person, or an objective kind of viewpoint. I think that
Right.
is one of the major hurdles that they need to get over, because
And
they've
I
tried
think
adapting these
also,
video games
like,
like Prince of
whenever,
Persia did not do so well.
right.
Yeah, just an example. Go
You
ahead.
know, I think I think the point that you mentioned about being able to interact with it is key as well, because you kind of form that bond, or you form that relationship when you're playing a game, and then if it's something that ends up getting adapted, whether or not the game is successful
Right.
or is well reviewed, there's always the potential to adapt that. I mean, we've been talking about an Assassin's Creed movie for a while. That is a wildly successful Ubisoft franchise. They've been talking about recently. I remember reading something about Watchdog. Now, Watchdog
yeah.
was not a great or super well-reviewed game, but the concept and the idea behind it was really interesting.
Is that
And
another
they're just like,
Ubisoft?
I actually don't know who the publisher was.
I just remember Ubisoft because they basically wanted to say, like, okay, look, we're going to option off the rights for these particular franchises, but we will have, like a majority controlling stake in how they get made, and how, like, what the ultimate version and vision of this is, because they want it to be, obviously they want it to be good, and they want it to reflect what they loved about the games to begin with. So I like the fact that they seem to be a lot more in on it than previous adaptations have been.
And it's interesting too, because I mean, with Watchdog, I wouldn't say it was my favorite game to play, but it was definitely unique and very different. And you are right, it was Ubisoft.
Okay,
And
that makes sense.
a movie could potentially breathe new life into continuing the franchise,
Right.
which could then result in a second video game.
Yeah,
So,
and this is the world
I
we
mean,
live in, where they kind of like reinforce each other if done well.
I mean, and it was one of it was, in terms of a new IP, it was very successful. I think I just pulled up the stat. The game sold like 4 million copies.
Which, for a brand new thing on the market, that it's pretty good. They had a pretty good marketing
Yes.
campaign from what I remember too. But yeah, so video games might be the wave of the future, guys. Especially as video games get closer and closer to just being interactive movies themselves. Basically, I mean, I love just sitting there watching some of the cutscenes. I always love them. Sometimes I'll just like watch other people playing the games. Like Twitch is this huge thing now. Steve, are you familiar with Twitch at all? Have you ever?
I am. But before we go any further,
Yeah.
something to remember is that they've wrapped and are in post production on Warcraft.
Correct.
Oh, that's right.
A lot of people it's under the radar because they haven't really released footage, but Duncan Jones directed it. It's a massive budget, huge movie. And the grapevine tells me that it's going to be something special. And that's going to be the one. I mean, I think that's going to show Duncan Jones is a huge gamer,
Right.
a huge gamer. And he's behind the wheel of this thing, and he did Source Code and Moon, and he's a very talented motherfucker. Sorry for cursing,
No, all good.
but he
I
is.
do it all the time.
No, swear
Swear
away.
away, dude. Whatever you need.
But no, I mean, he's very talented, and I think he's going to be the one that shows how to do it. Because I saw like test footage at Comic-Con, or I saw footage or whatever, and it showed. I guess the movie's going to show both sides, like
Right.
the creatures as well as the humans, and it's going to show like everyone exists in a line of gray. And it looks. I think it's going to be something special. I really do.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. It's a big budget video game adaptation that's also part like within the fantasy movement. So maybe you'll get your Dungeons and Dragons adaptation after that, a good one, hopefully. But yeah, that might also be kind of a bridge into more video game adaptations. It really only takes a couple huge hits to convince other people that, okay, I want to be part of this game now, because people are obviously on board and they're paying to go see this, and we'll make our money back and we can franchise the shit out of this thing. I really think it's just going to take a couple of them, and it seems like Ubisoft and now Warcraft, maybe those are the ones to kind of hang your hat on and hope that they do well. I'm hoping
Yeah, I
anyway.
mean, all we need, like you said, is a couple champions to kind of push this through and set a precedent.
Yeah, always good. So, Steve, any final kind of like business thoughts from you before we just switch over our discussion and kind of change gears completely to talk about the ThunderCats episodes we watched for this week too? Because I want to get into kind of a fun discussion as well. But any final words of wisdom from the business side of Hollywood?
Uh, what I said earlier, just remember when you read about stuff online, until it's in a
Right.
theater or they're filming or, you know what I mean, it's going to be on TV, don't worry about it. Don't get upset. Worry about it when it's casting and when it's going into production. That's when you should start being like, wait a minute, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Dude, I would even say don't worry about it quite so much when it's casting because you don't know how these people are going to do in the role. Yes, they might be terrible. They also might surprise you and be fantastic. I know people on the message boards just lose their minds whenever they cast, oh, I don't know, Michael B. Jordan as the Human
Yeah.
Torch, for example. Just settle, just relax, and just wait until the final product is out, and then feel free to just lose your minds if it's terrible.
Oh,
Just
just remember something
yeah,
important. People lost their minds about Michael Keaton
yep,
playing
yep,
Batman. People lost their minds about Heath Ledger.
exactly.
People lost their
Yeah.
minds about Ben Affleck. People lose their minds when it's just not their perfect choice that they had in their brain, and but they almost always are
Yeah,
convinced.
exactly. Eventually, it just takes you some time, and then they forget about it and they move on to other things. We're going to move on to other things like the Thundercats. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong,
Segues.
but I think I feel like the first time I met you out at Comic Con, you were wearing either your Thundercats T-shirt and or your hat. I feel like you lost your hat. Did you lose that hat, the Thundercats hat you had?
No, I have a Thundercats beanie that I've had for, I mean, honestly, at least a decade, maybe 15 years. I've had this
Nice.
thing, and I wore it's with me wherever I go when it's cold because I have a shaved head.
Yeah.
And my most vivid memory of that hat is I was in Paris wearing the hat. It fell off me, and I was getting on a metro, and I got off the train to run to the stairs to grab it. So if I'd gotten on that train, it would have been gone. But I've managed to keep it for this entire time. I wear it. I was worn in New York City like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I've had it forever.
it's a good luck hat, and that's honestly I remembered that hat because Sean was like, "Okay, we're gonna do this Rankin Bass trilogy." We already covered on the show. We kind of went backwards in order. We did Tiger Sharks first, thanks to a suggestion from our buddy
Oof.
Joe, and then we were
You're the
like,
worst,
"Yeah,
Joe.
you're the worst," because that show was the worst. And then we went backwards and we covered Silverhawks, which was not the worst, but also very just man. That thing
That
was
was pretty damn
Oh,
terrible.
it was so disjointed. And now we're working our way back to the OG, the Thundercats. And yeah, Steve was the first guy I thought of because I knew he was a fan. And I know that Sean was like, "Yeah, let's get him on board for the 25th show." So here we are, listeners, 25th show, talking about a fairly big show, Thundercats, that I'm presuming we're all big fans of. I know I am. I know Steve is. Sean, Matt, how about you guys?
I was a huge fan of this. I had a visor. I had a Thundercats visor
Oh,
for
yikes.
a very long time. Yeah, remember when visors were cool in the
Yeah.
early 2000s?
No, I never went to a golf course.
Oh, fair enough. But yeah, I feel like I know that I know that this is the first in sort of the success for Rankin Bass. I really feel like I know that this served as a template for
Oh,
Silverhawk,
very much so.
for Silverhawks and for Tiger Sharks. I feel like those two kind of suffered from like the multiplicity effect of like a clone of a clone is just going to progressively get more and more dumbed down as you go. So this was fun to watch, albeit there were some moments that were a little bit campy, but I was very happy to kind of jump back into this guy and watch him again.
Yeah, there was some camp in this one for sure because they always kind of had that like heavy-handed like here's the lesson, kids. I don't know that they had quite as many of the like the did they have the tags at the end? I only got to rewatch the pilot and the second episode and they didn't have them. But I think Steve mentioned offline that this when this series originally came out, it came out as a sort of a mini series slash movie. The first couple episodes all tied up. Is that correct? Do I remember that correctly?
I just remember it being that the original movie was, I want to say it was either a 60 or 90-minute
Okay.
cartoon, and it started with them on Thundera, and he was a little kid, and then they did they got to Third Earth, he grew, and then they encountered Mumra. Like that's all one episode.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so I think in the way that we have it broken down in the series now, thanks YouTube, is there's the pilot, which is called Exodus. So that's the first half hour. And then we've got the Unholy Alliance, which, what a fucking great name for a kid's TV show. Second episode, man, Unholy Alliance. That's when Mum Ra kind of shows up on scene. So it was pretty cool. I like the way that they introduced everything. Really bizarre. A bizarre intro though, because you've got the title characters who, like Steve said, they're on a spaceship and they're fleeing from their planet, which is currently in the process of being destroyed. So they're fleeing Thundera, and they're kind of watching through their view screens as the planet just, explodes from the inside out.
Do we know exactly why it was blowing
Look,
up?
I don't know if this is something that they went back to either in the original series mythology or the 2011 reboot mythology. I feel like the more recent series did go back and try to explore that a little bit more, but I don't know off the top of my head why that blew up. I don't know if the Death Star targeted it or what it was.
It was very well timed in terms of Jaga being wake up, Lion-O. We need to have him watch this planet explode.
Yeah, we need to just scar him for life.
Yeah.
But it was great though. Okay, so we've got our title characters. I'm sure listeners out there, you probably have a very vivid image of these ThunderCats in mind. However, you might not remember them how they originally appeared on screen. Do you guys remember the glaring difference between kind of the ThunderCats once they were on Third Earth and were involved in all kind of battles, and the ThunderCats just kind of leisurely hanging out on their spaceship? The glaring difference.
Oh yeah, they're totally nude.
Yeah, totally nude ThunderCats.
Yeah.
100% naked ThunderCats.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, oh, I do not remember that at all.
Yeah, it's a little, I guess kind of disturbing. It's weird. I think Sean had a good description of them to give you an image. Sean, do you remember what?
No, it was very bizarre. They had weird kind of Ken and Barbie doll bodies where you didn't actually there was you could see that they had very clean lines in terms of what was there, and whatever would have been a genital was just very properly covered up with a little bit of fur.
Yeah, so they're just furries. They're basically just furries at this point.
Oh boy.
With a belt on.
Yeah.
They occasionally have a belt on. I don't know why.
Well, how are you going to hold your stuff?
But that's it. It's just a belt, nothing else. How are you going to hold your stuff? But I love the fact that okay, so everybody's just this nude ThunderCat hanging out, and then the planet blows up. Everybody's sad, and then at some point, is this when Jaga kind of gifted them their clothes and armor, or was it right when the mutants attacked? I can't quite remember.
No. So it was they in terms of progression. Jaga wakes up Lion-O, makes him watch his home planet blow up.
Right.
And then he's just I need to show you this bitchin' sword.
Yeah.
Let's go take a look at it. And he's just oh, this is so heavy. He's don't worry about it. You'll be fine.
He's you're not strong enough yet. Yeah.
Everybody kind of, he asks Schnarf to go in and get everybody, and Schnarf's just a total bitch about it. Goes and fetches everybody, brings them into the room, and Jaga does this whole it's dangerous to go out there alone.
Right.
Take all these things.
Right.
And they just
also it's dangerous to go outside naked.
Yeah. So he just gifts them all this gear, kind of with the idea that you've never had to really defend yourself before.
Right.
And so he gives everybody this clothing, and then he's hey Panthro, I'm gonna turn you into an S&M guy.
Yeah.
With some spiky
You can have some
suspenders.
sweet spikes.
You better get into this, buddy.
Well, look, now here's a good point to just talk about this. I want to know each of your favorite characters. Who's your favorite ThunderCat or villain? It doesn't matter. Anything from the show. You can pick somebody that shows up way down the line, episodes later. I'm curious to know who kind of stuck with you as one of your favorites. Steve, I'm gonna turn it over to you since you're a longtime fan. Who stuck with you? Who's your favorite of the ThunderCats from the whole show? Put you on the spot. That's right.
I'm trying to think. And listen, I could make up these. I really liked some of the side characters that were introduced towards the end of the show. They were Rover Bill, and there were some wacky characters. but the truth is, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be Lion-O.
Yeah.
I always wanted the sword. I always wanted to be able to do that stuff. So it's always going to come back to that. But I did like those side characters. You know?
Dude, and let's talk about that sword for a second too before I get to the other guys. Just because, okay, it's the Sword of Omens, all right?
Right.
That's the name of this badass fucking sword that, like, it basically has a mind of its own. It's awesome. It's compact. You can store it as a dagger, and then when you need it to be a giant fucking like claymore, you just do this little rhyme, and it's good to go. This thing will cut anything down. It's awesome. It's got these. The hilt of it has these kind of like guards that come up. And Lino calls them holes in the first episode, which pissed me
Yeah,
off.
that was great.
He's like, "This sword has holes in it." I'm like, "The fuck are you talking about?" But anyway,
Have you never seen a sword
yeah.
before?
Have you never seen a sword? Those aren't holes. But anyway, so you look through them and you get sight beyond sight, which is basically you can kind of see into the future, or in the case of episode 2, I believe, you can see what's standing right in front of you, which was kind of a waste of that.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
Oh my god. But then it's
I was
got
like, God, that's so useful.
he's like
It'd be perfect in San Francisco for fog.
yeah, exactly. Just see through the fog where the mutants of Plundar are waiting for you. But then it's got the Eye of Thundera, which, to its credit, the new series I feel did much better service to the lore of that particular. It's stone that was kind of like hewed into the shape of how it is in the original ThunderCats. It was called the War Stone in the new series, and it was one of 4 different like sort of spiritual or power stones. They built up this huge mythology behind it, and I don't know how much of it comes from the original one, but very cool spin with that new series, how they did it. But yeah, dude, I can totally understand why everybody would want to be Lion-O. The cool thing about his character, not just that he was like this huge, muscly guy who wielded a sword and could kick everybody's ass, he was still a kid. So the whole point of him being, he was like a 10-year-old kid that was going to eventually become like the lord and the king of everything, of all the Thundercats. He was a kid on the spaceship. Everybody else goes into stasis.
Let's talk about
Let's
this.
talk about that. Go ahead. I introed for you.
So, like, Jaga very ominously just says, like, you know, if you're in a suspension capsule, some natural aging does take place.
Right.
And then died 5 minutes later.
Yeah, it didn't take him long to keel over.
That was the best.
Oh my god. He's like, I just can't do it anymore.
He complains about the fact that he doesn't want to use autopilot,
Right.
and then immediately hits the autopilot button.
He's like, I sure hope this
Obi-Wan
robot
Kenobi's
can do it.
right out of the scene.
Yep.
So, but like they get in these suspension capsules in order to go to Third Earth, and so Lino is the only person. There are 2 kids. There's Wily Cat and Wily Kit.
Right.
Like they are as young. You seemingly think that they are as young or the same age as Lino, and Lino is the only one that like gets older upon arrival.
I think, didn't his pod get damaged at some point?
Who knows?
I think it did.
I mean, it's just did it? I mean, because they kind of like crash landed.
Yeah, I
like,
think it
on
got
Earth.
damaged because he was the first one that that kind of woke up and popped open too, and then he rescues Snarf. Everybody else is still sleeping in their pods when they land on Third Earth, but I think his got damaged in the fight with the mutants.
Okay.
So I mean, basically, I like that idea because he was still like a 10-year-old kid, so he's the age of the kids that are watching this show, you know, more or less, and he's now in like a ripped adult's body, so it's basically like Tom Hanks in Big. Only more athletic, and he can, you know, he is now the foil for the kids that can kind of, or the everyman for the kids that they get to be Lion-O, because he's a kid in an adult's body with a bitchin' sword. So obviously you want to be Lion-O. But I want to go back to that question, Matt. Did you have a favorite from the show? Did anybody stick with you all these years later?
You know, it's going to be a repeat, but it was Lino.
Fair.
When I was a kid, I had the ThunderCats sword.
Oh,
so
nice.
Did
that
you?
was- yeah, man, the
Nice.
plastic sword with the I think it actually
Didn't it have
had
a
the
light?
eye on one side and then like the ThunderCat logo on the other.
Yeah, it had a light in there too, didn't it? There was like a button on
Yeah.
the hilt that you would push.
Yeah, not in the tax bracket I lived in.
Oh
but,
boy, you didn't have lights in your tax.
Yeah, no,
you held
we
it. You
just
held
had-
it in front of a light bulb.
Yeah, that's it. Kid.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sean, did you have any that stuck with you, or are you gonna go line
Oh.
3 for 3?
No, I mean, I watching the first 2 episodes again. Snarf,
Ugh.
hands down, Snarf. That he just bitched for 2 episodes straight. I mean, what a sad sack. I mean,
Sean has this
what-
habit of picking like the cutesy and ridiculously annoying characters, whether it's like the fish dog from Tiger Sharks, I do like Tally-Ho from Silverhawks, I will say that.
Yes.
But Snarf, I don't
Uh,
know. God, does anybody really like Snarf? I thought
he
most people were irritated by him. No?
Well, I mean, I loved the whole like snarf, 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 snarf,
Ugh.
like all the time. Like that was wonderful. It was great
Oh
to
yeah,
hear.
it was great.
No, I enjoyed. I remember that very fondly from the show, and so it was great to hear. It was great to hear Snarf again. But I forgot how much of a downer he is.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, how much of he's just a total Eeyore, and I mean, just every 5 seconds he's just like, I don't get any credit, and just shut up. Like, there's other stuff at play here, buddy. Like, just calm down.
I do like him for
Um,
his loyalty, though, because he does stick by Lion-O's side through thick and thin. And he's not super
Yes.
useful most of the time. He's good as like a distraction because other things just try to kill him. But,
Well, yeah.
yeah.
I love that they were just like in the pilot, like they're talking. He's complaining about the fact that like he needs to like get his rest and he needs to like sleep because if he gets sick, like
Right.
here's the thing, like I'm assuming that Lino is like he is the heir apparent
Yeah.
of like of a race that is dying out.
Their
And
freaking
you're
planet just blew up. Yeah.
And you just scarred him with this. The protector that you gave to him is like this
Overweight.
tiny little like overweight like cat that just negs everything, and you're just like how is he protecting and training this guy to become like a great noble thoughtful warrior when all he does is just bitch the entire time?
Well,
I
I'll tell
loved
you
it.
what, they
I
didn't
thought it was
exactly
wonderful.
remedy that in the new series, but they did make him a little
Good.
less annoying. No, they didn't make him good. They didn't make him better at all. They made him less annoying because he'll still say
No, I'm
snarf.
saying good. I'm glad he's still bitching.
Oh, you're glad he's still bitching? No, he doesn't speak English in the new series. He doesn't say anything. He just kind of makes snarf
What?
noises. That's it. They don't let
What?
him talk. Nope, they don't let him talk.
Ah.
Because he was like the original Jar Jar Binks. Because a lot of people just hated him. So fucking annoying. I'm amazed. Nobody's pulling for Panthro here or Tigra or. I can understand no Wily Cat, but even Cheetara.
Well, no, I mean,
like,
I think we can all agree Chitara is super hot,
Yeah.
and I am totally on board with her. I'm gonna Rule
Well,
34
why don't-
Google her later.
Oh, boy.
Oh, God.
There's a lot out there too. Steve, in case you're wondering, we always let the listeners know whether they should or should not check the Rule 34 for any of these cartoons. Most of the time, it's definitely do not check it because there is some disturbing stuff out there. But there's always something. Whether it's Turbo Teen or ThunderCats, there is always something. Yeah. No, I don't know. I feel like I'm torn between Tigra, because he was kind of like the scientist, architect, intellectual, kind of like second in command guy,
Okay.
and Bengali. Do you guys remember Bengali? He was a side
No.
character that came later. Steve, you remember him?
I have a vague. Again, I remember a lot of the side characters,
Right.
and some of them were like in one episode,
Exactly.
and some came back. I believe like the Rover Bills came back.
Yeah, the little Ewok robot teddy bear creatures. Yeah.
They definitely didn't take that from the Ewoks. Definitely,
No, definitely not.
no way.
But yeah, so Bengali was he was another Thunderian that I forget how he showed up, but it was him, Linkso, and Pumira. These are three different newer Thunderians that showed up later in the, I think, like second season or something. Bengali was like this white Bengal tiger, and he had these hammers that he used as a blacksmith. They of course also shot like energy blasts and stuff because why not? Because all the
Oh, of
weapons
course,
did. Yeah,
of course.
exactly. But I don't know. I just remember I thought he was cool. He had a cool design. He was a blacksmith, which I thought was pretty cool. But that was just one of the other like random side characters that I remembered. But man, this show is just chock full of them. And we're getting a little short on time. We should probably talk about the mutants and definitely have to talk about Mum Ra as well. So you guys want to talk about kind of how we're introduced first to the mutants and give the people a little refresher on the three main mutants that we spent some time with throughout the show. Do you guys remember them? Do you remember the creatures, at least, that they were based off of?
It was like apes, dogs, and cats.
Or was it like a toad?
Yeah, it was like a lizard. There were like lizard people, and then like Steve said, there were jackals, the jackalmen, and then
Yeah.
Monkeyan was the guy's name, but they were all
that's
kind of like
right.
simians. Yeah. So he was like
What's
a
funny-
albino. What's
I've
that?
seen the show. I've seen a ridiculous amount of episodes, and yet I screwed that up.
Oh no, it's cool. I mean, it's just so. I mean, how do you even like? It's just so weird. And first of all, their names are like, well, Slythe is pretty cool. He's the lizard guy who's kind of the leader of the mutants. The mutants of Plundar, by the way.
Of course.
Plundar is their planet,
Yes.
which is so good. And then
God.
Monkeyan is the other henchman's name, and then Jackalman. And later they have like Vulture Man and Rataro and like all kinds of just crazy batshit mutants. Yeah, it gets into some real weird places, especially when like the Lunatics show up. I love the mythology of this show, guys. There's just so much to it, and it's all just completely insane. I feel like Rankin Bass and the other writers probably spent a lot of their creative energy on this one, and then by the time they got to Silverhawks and Tiger Sharks, were just kind of like scraping the bottom of the barrel because they didn't know.
Paste,
Yeah,
copy
they did
paste.
not know what was left. Yeah, but okay, how do we feel about Mum-Ra, the big bad? Because he's not even in the first episode. The ThunderCats go up against the mutants from Plundar. Mum-Ra doesn't show up until the second episode. Because guess what? He's already on Third Earth. He's been hanging out in his dark pyramid for
Yeah.
thousands of years, ever since it was First Earth, which I thought was interesting. Do we like Mum-Ra? Does he stick with you at all?
The thing I find interesting about Mum-Ra
Yeah.
is that you can't go wrong with an evil guy that can transform. The problem is that, in my opinion, like the pilot episode, there's like the rules and regulations of what these characters can do and can't do
Right.
changes from scene to scene.
Exactly.
You know, it's bizarre. Like, Mum-Ra has Lion-O down, and he can get the sword, but yeah, he's not going to do that. He's just going to keep on announcing his name and, say I'm going to get it.
Yeah,
But,
and he keeps calling him boy too, and just like laughing at him and like flying over him the whole time. It was a really bizarre fight scene.
and then of course, so basically his reflection
Yeah.
brings him down. I mean, every episode things change. The rules, and by the way, they announced in the first episode that the ThunderCats kryptonite is oil.
What?
Yeah, that was
Basically,
weird.
the oil gets on the Eye of Thundera, and that means the Eye of Thundera cannot be used.
Yeah, it was like because if I can't see, then I totally can't use any of my other powers. It says
Yeah.
this magical stone that can
Was
summon.
this like a heavy-handed way of them telling us that we're gonna have like oil crisis problems
sure.
later?
I'm sure.
I'm going to say no.
No.
I'm going to say that that's a reach. I think it was just, I think the oil was just there, and it's just a plot device. What can we make that will make the Eye of Thundera not work? Let's do oil.
Dude, the funny part is though that like Lino, he walks up, he's just out in the middle of the woods, just hanging out by himself because he's a big boy and he can do whatever he wants. And he's just like, a black lake. Let me just jam my fingers into it. Ow, that's hot. And it's just like, what a fucking idiot. He just jabs his hand into like a boiling tar, basically, and then just kind of walks away. He's just like, just to let you know, viewers, this is a lake full of black tar. And now we're going to go on to the next scene. Yeah.
It could, instead of oil, it could be tar.
Well, yeah,
but you know what I'm
same,
saying.
Same thing. I mean, same thing.
It's the same
For the
stuff,
purposes
exactly.
of their exposition there, exact same thing. Because I think this is the point where the mutants show up and are kind of like, I don't know if they're camouflaged by Mum-Ra or not, but they're like sneaking up on Lion-O, and that's when he uses the sight beyond sight, just kind of spins around, and then lo and behold, it reveals the mutants standing right in front of him. So of course he fights them. That fight I was okay with because the mutants are kind of like, they're not great. They're not the most adept fighters still. The Mum-Ra fight, do you remember the line that Lion-O says to the guys at the end when he tells them how he defeated Mum-Ra? It's like Steve said, it was
no.
his reflection, but it wasn't just like he reflected sunlight into his eyes.
Oh, it was like the reflection of the evil in his own face.
Exactly. He was like, he was defeated by the reflection of the evil within himself. The end. It's just like, what does that mean?
What?
So Mum-Ra, the self-professed ever-living, who basically owes his powers and his allegiance to the ancient spirits of evil, lives as a mummy in a dark pyramid, was terrified by his own evil. I didn't buy that. I don't even think I bought that as a kid. I was just like, well, alright, he'll come back and he'll be a little better next time around. Maybe he just hasn't been out in a while and he wasn't sure what to do with everything. Did you guys know there was...
He's got to stretch out. He's got to get back in the
Yeah, I
game.
mean, you can't just jump in. You can't just jump into a marathon after being a mummy for 1,000 years. You gotta, take it slow. Get back to
But the other thing that makes no sense about Mum-Ra is that he can transform into this ultimate power, but they never explain what's the price he pays for doing
Right.
it. Why doesn't he stay in this
Yeah.
form? There's so many unanswered questions. All they needed was one line saying, I can transform into the ultimate Mumra, but I can only last in this form for 1 hour.
Yeah,
You know,
some kind of
like
time limit or something like, or like a distance from the pyramid, his power wanes or something like that. Yeah, some little bit of
just
dialogue.
something,
Yeah,
like I have a limited amount of power or whatever, just some explanation, and you'd be fine. But instead, they just went with, we will change the rules
every
every
episode.
scene of the show.
Yeah, that'll work. We'll just do this on the fly. I think eventually, because Mumra was so like tough to defeat, and because he was the ever living, and whatever they tried to do to him, he kept coming back. Eventually, I think they took the fight to his temple, and they figured out that if you destroy the four statues, the ancient spirits of evil, it actually knocks his power down because they kind of like they're his conduit to that kind of power. Did you guys know there's also an
A female Mumra?
yeah, thank you for picking that up because I
Yeah.
did not know that until I was researching today. I had no clue.
Ditto.
Man, what was her name again?
Mum
There
Rana.
it is.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
Yeah, right?
so bad. But guess what? Well, if Mum-Ra lives in a black pyramid, where do you think she lives?
Probably in a white pyramid.
white
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Go to
If
Picasso.
if he owes his allegiance to the ancient spirits of evil, what do you think she owes her allegiance to?
I'm gonna go Ancient Spirits of
You
Good.
would be correct,
Yeah,
sir. You would be
you are.
correct. That, unfortunately, is
Flawless.
like the level of depth that some of this writing goes to. It's just, God. I will say this, that the new series does a really good job of trying to expand the mythology, paying homage to the original series, developing some new characters, and some old characters in different ways. I mean, people show up like King Claudius, or Emperor Claudius. Claudius, I think it's King. That's Lion-O's father. Groon, known as a destroyer, who is an interesting kind of like two-faced character throughout the series. The Roberbills, the elephant creatures. They even bring the tiger sharks back at some point in the new series.
Yeah.
So they definitely do a good job of pleasing old and new fans. Unfortunately, they just didn't get the ratings. And why?
Yeah.
Do you know why though? I mean, I think it's because they've gotten away from the network model and they've gone to the cable model where there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more access to other things out there, and it just didn't work out. I don't know if that's 100% correct, but that's just kind of my opinion on it. But
I mean, to go back to our previous conversation, it seems like, I mean, I have not watched the reboot.
it's worth a watch.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued to sit down and watch it. It seems like from our previous conversation that they handled it with the respect that it deserves. Just sadly, it never really got an audience.
Look, and that's how it happens sometimes. I mean, there have been, and this is not new either. There have been great movies out there that just for whatever reason, I mean, I'll point to the Wachowskis and some of their recent works. Great movies, a lot of heart that went into them. Not necessarily even an original story. It could have been an adaptation, but it just didn't find an audience. Whether it was one slip up of marketing or released at the wrong time or just something. It doesn't always work out, even if you do have your heart set on it. But
Yeah.
this one, at least, you can pick up. I believe you can pick up the original series and the new series on DVD. So you can check it out and kind of put your money where your mouth is if you are a fan of this show. Unfortunately, we're at about an hour. This one flew by crazy quick. Sean and Matt, do you guys have anything else you want to add on this show, on ThunderCats, and do you recommend it?
I
Definitely
absolutely
recommend
recommend it.
It's 2 for
I
2.
loved it.
Nice. And Steve, I want to give you the last word as well on ThunderCats show. Anything you want to add as far as recommendations or any memories from the show you want to share real quick before we wrap up?
I definitely recommend the original show. I saw the reboot, the one that aired a few years ago, and I remember enjoying it for what it was, and I thought it was an ambitious. I thought they didn't like lay down and say we're just rebooting this to and not going to put any effort in.
Right.
I thought they really made an effort, and that I remember I was surprised at the adult themes that made it through.
Definitely.
I definitely recommend both, and it's just it's a cool world and a cool cartoon.
Awesome, man. Steve, I just want to say thank you very much for taking time out of your crazy schedule to spend an hour with us today on our 25th episode talking ThunderCats and the business of Hollywood. I know the other guys want to thank you as well, so I'll let them do that now.
Yes, thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. So we're going to do
Yeah,
a
it was
little
absolutely great.
do our wrap up now. We're going to share some plugs first of all. So Sean, do you have anything coming up? Now that we're in November here, do you have anything coming up next couple of weeks before we get into the holiday season?
Sure. I will have some. Since it's November, I will have some shows that are coming up in December. You can check out tickets at WashingtonImprovTheater.com.
Cool, and we'll have those links up on our site as per usual. Matt, before we roll into the holidays, anything new for you going on?
No, just beginning the countdown of the Thanksgiving feast, and gonna start putting some sandbags around the toilet for the main event.
Oh boy,
Oh
I don't
boy.
know what that means. Just send him bags of turkey sandwiches to Bag of Sandwiches.
Yeah, tweet me at Bag of Sandwiches.
For me, before the holiday season comes upon us and puts a break on the TV shows, I'll still be reviewing them over at Collider.com. Shows like Gotham, The Flash, Arrow, The Walking Dead, and the relatively new Constantine. So you can come over to Collider.com and look for me. I'll be reviewing them each and every week. And since I said Collider.com, I gotta turn it over to the CEO, editor-in-chief, head honcho, Steve Weintraub himself. Steve, anything crazy coming up for the rest of the year, pretty much for you? Because I know you got a lot of nutty stuff on your schedule. You say you're taking some time off in the month of November, kind of chilling out a little bit.
Not at all.
Not at all.
I don't know what vacation is. I usually take the Thanksgiving things are slow, but basically the site is blessed to have a lot of readers, and I know what we're posting over the next few weeks in terms of interviews, and we have exclusive interviews with just everybody, and Benedict Cumberbatch for Imitation Game, Jake Gyllenhaal for Nightcrawler this week. There's just a ton of stuff coming, and I know that the embargo's lifting. I'm not allowed to say what it was, but arguably the biggest movie of next year. I did a set visit,
Nice.
and the embargo on the first two interviews lifts Tuesday morning, and one of them, they're both interviews that I'm sure people are going to want to read, and perhaps the movie I'm talking about had a trailer that came out unexpectedly last week.
I am ultra looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm ultra excited for it.
So I've not named it, but hypothetically, Tuesday morning, I think you'll be, if you're looking forward to a big superhero movie, you might want to hit the site.
Well, no, that's fine. You want to cut strings from that, so you want to make sure that you're not
Yes.
fettered to that.
There are no strings on me.
No, there's no strings on Steve. Steve Weintraub, everybody, hardest working man in showbiz. Steve, we're gonna do some contact info. So where can the people find you if they're not already following you on Twitter?
On Twitter and Instagram, it's Collider Frosty, and I'm on the site. You can find me on Collider with ease.
Absolutely. And Sean, where can the folks find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Sean Paul Ellis.
And Matt Barron, where can the folks find you?
On Twitter at Bag of Sandwiches.
I love that so much.
Yes. The best.
You can also find me on Twitter at Dr. Claw MD. If you're looking for more on the site, SaturdayMorningCartoons.com. Remember, that's morning with a U. If you want to check out our Tumblr page full of fun, crazy stuff put there by Sean Paul Ellis himself, that's SaturdayMorningCartoons.tumblr.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at MorningTunes. And if you want to send us some of your favorite, ThunderCats fanfic or your own DeviantArt or maybe some Rule 34s if you want to be on the sly, you can send that to SaturdayMorningCartoons at gmail.com. That's pretty much it for us. Guys, thank you for listening through these 25 episodes. We really do appreciate each and every one of you. It's been great to watch the numbers kind of climbing over the last few months here. So we will continue to do this for quite some time. Thank you for listening to the 25th episode with Steve Weintraub of Collider.com talking about the ThunderCats. I'm going to let Sean take us out. Thanks again for listening.
Dave, Baron, we rock!